Hello, podcast listeners. I'm Barbara Morgan, and you're listening to Austin Film Festival's On Story. This week on On Story, we'll hear from screenwriter April Shih, who worked on shows like You're the Worst, This is America, and FX's Dave. She's joined by Tripper Clancy, who wrote the script for 2019's Stuber, and has worked on Netflix's I Am Not Okay With This. April Shih is a screenwriter and producer, known for You're the Worst, Mrs. America, starring Cate Blanchett, and most recently, serving as supervising producer on FX's Dave, which follows the semi-autobiographical story of American rapper Lil Dicky. April has also produced several films and plays, including the Ovation Award-winning revival of Kiss of the Spider-Woman, the musical. Tripper Clancy is a screenwriter known for writing the scripts for Stuber, which starred Kumali Nanjiani and Dave Bautista, and Die Hard, which starred Kevin Hart and John Travolta. After working in the Fox Writers Studio in 2011, Tripper went on to write comedies and dramas of all shapes and sizes for Columbia Pictures, 20th Century Fox, and Amazon. Most recently, Clancy was a writer on Season 1 of I Am Not Okay With This, a half-hour dramedy from Netflix. Moderator Harrison Glaser spoke with the pair about their journeys as writers at the Austin Film Festival. Clips of Dave, courtesy of FX Productions, LLC. Clips of You're the Worst, courtesy of Bluebush Productions, LLC. Clips of I Am Not Okay With This, courtesy of Netflix Studios, LLC. Clips of Stuber, courtesy of 20th Century Fox Film Corporation.
Well, let's talk about you two for a second. This might be a broad question, but is there something that drew you to comedy specifically? Like, why did you find yourself writing on comedy shows or writing comedy features?
My mom says I'm the second funniest person in my family. And so that was enough incentive for me to pursue a career as a comedy writer. My brother is very funny, but he's an attorney. So I felt like there was a niche that I could fill. I think, whether you make people laugh socially or in writing, it's this desire to entertain that I think is part of, and you can do that in a thriller or horror or drama, anything you want. But there is something about finding something that makes me laugh when I'm writing.
I'm not sure if I'm a comedy writer, actually. I write dramedy, I bring the drama into a comedy room, and I think Dave season 2 has seen a tonal shift, and I think that's partially my fault. But I, to be completely honest, same with you. I just like writing things that make me laugh out loud, and most of the time, I'm the only one laughing at my own jokes, but that's okay. And I happened to write something that was just tonally true to myself, and it happened to fit in a half-hour format, and then I got hired on a half-hour show, but I still write, I write dramas as well. But I think the comedy that I write comes from character and comes from something true about, the human condition. So it's funny because it's often uncomfortable or painful.
So Tripper, I know you've recently done both TV and film comedy. Which one do you prefer, and how does your approach differ depending?
I mean, I love the first draft of anything where there is no one else around and I can just write stuff and then see what the reaction is. I think it's the most fun of the process. I find it hard when there's a thing where everyone knows this is a punchline and then we're just throwing out alts for this to try to nail this one thing. And sometimes the construction of the joke isn't right. I just prefer to write funny dialogue, putting characters in a situation where the humor is going to kind of come organically without needing a set up punchline.
Writers' rooms are everything. Even before I was ever staffed, I was, in plenty of writers' groups, and we would punch up each other's material. And I think people just bring different skill sets to the group. And I'm certainly not the joke person in the room, but we had really funny people in the room. And it was always amazing to kind of watch their brains work, because there's kind of a mathematical, it seems, energy and rhythm to joke telling. And you can learn it, I think. I think I got funnier being around funny people, but I also knew, I was well, it's not really my job in this particular room to always be coming up with jokes.
Well, so despite the fact that you don't think joke writing is your superpower in the writer's room, do you find yourself pitching jokes that end up working or that still get the room to laugh? Or how do you find your way into that? Or do you just take a step back and let the joke tellers do it all?
I mean, it is organic, like Tripper is saying. I'll say things that people laugh at. I'm well, I guess that should be in it then. It feels like people are responding. That's funny. But in terms of actually formulating in my head something funny, and then pitching it, I'm not actually good at that. I think most of it comes very kind of intuitive for me. I
think so much of a funny moment is surprise. And so when people think that this joke or this scene is going in one direction. So it's like when you're pitching on alts or jokes in a room, it's like it's usually that one out of left field that feels like it's either hilarious or it's really wrong and doesn't fit. Like that's usually kind of the one that everyone sparks to, because it's not, like I think that's the best comedy too, is like half the people think it's hilarious and the other half people are like, what the did I just watch?
Something that's interesting to me about writing TV comedy, especially if you're not the creator, is you have to adapt to a sense of humor that might not be your own. Especially like April, Lil Dicky has a very specific sense of humor.
It has to switch over. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
I think you can hear us now. Can you hear us?
I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm calling because I'm about to access my bar mitzvah money, and I thought you should know.
What?
Oh my God, what's wrong?
Nothing's wrong. Everything's great. I'm actually getting like a very big rapper on one of my songs, but to do that, I have to pay him his fee, which is $10,000 in this case.
$10,000? Are you crazy? What, David? You haven't made a single dollar off of this, and now you want...
How can we never talk about the 15 million views that I've gotten in 3 months, Mom? That's a huge accomplishment. We never talk about that.
But why can't you profit off those views? Isn't there money in the stream these days?
It's called the cloud dot.
I can't profit off of it because it's not my beat. It's just a beat I stole online.
You stole it? Wait a minute, what?
I don't think anyone has quite a sensibility like him, but you have to write in his voice, as does the team. What's the process for you and for the rest of the writers in finding that voice of someone that has a very different experience and very different sensibility than you do?
Well, I mean, we're lucky because Dave is in the room too, and often he will be speaking, and we'll just be like, "Well, that's funny," so that's going in the script. And I think he also leaves a lot of room on set for some kind of improvisation whenever the moment strikes, which is not necessarily true for other shows. Like You're the Worst was like word for word, but that is the job, is to really like observe and listen to the way the kind of creators' voices and the characters' voices are, and you kind of understand the humor of the show that you're writing on, hopefully. I mean, I've been very lucky to like write on things that I truly think are funny. Mm-hmm. So when something funny is happening, I'm like, well, that should go in. Like the great thing about comedy is you have like a built-in response system, and if you laugh, then it's funny, and if you don't laugh, then it's not funny, and you kind of just know.
You wrote shows for Kevin Hart, who also has a sense of humor that I imagine is different than your own. What's your process of adapting that style of humor?
I already knew it was Kevin. It was just going to be a version of himself that he was playing. So like, that's a huge bonus, because usually when you're writing a spec or a pilot or something, you're creating a character on a thin air, and then you're going to later try to cast to that thing that you created. And there's going to be a marriage where you're trying to tweak the script to like match that person. But so I can have fun with that in Die Hard, where I'm like, okay, this is what he's known for. I'm gonna make him hate this part of himself, because I just imagine that's what he would want to do. And then he's going to read the script, and he's either going to tell me to f off, or he's going to say, yeah, this is great, this is interesting, let's do it. So it's a big advantage, obviously, if you can have talent already attached and you're writing to their voice.
Are there times when you're like, this is funny, but it's not the type of funny we're going for, and we have to like cut out a really good joke or go a different direction, even though you were really proud of something you wrote?
All of the shows I write on are so character driven that if the joke is just not in the, firstly, not in the voice of the character, and secondly, not in the voice of the show, it's just as like, well, it made us laugh in the room and might be like an inside bit that we always bring up but won't make it in, because otherwise you're just throwing stuff in that will dilute the actual like essence of what the show is supposed to be. And we really think about voice and listen to like how the characters speak and what their patterns are. And I think it's helpful to really always go back to character to be like, what would this person really do in this situation, and how can that be something potentially funny?
Same with you, Tripper?
A lot of directors will shoot the script and then shoot improv takes where the actors can riff on things. And like, sometimes you have a joke that you think is just amazing, and then you hear the actors riff on one of their other takes, and you're like, oh my God, they just destroyed my joke. Like they made it so much better and so much funnier. And then like one day someone might come up to you and be like, I love that line that you wrote in that movie. And you're like, that was ad-libbed by the actor on the day, but I just take credit for it because that's what I do.
It appears to me like there's something very immediate about comedy. Generally, like you're saying, there's an immediate reaction that can't be faked. You make something funny, people laugh. But when you're writing a TV show or a film, even more so, you might write a joke that people won't laugh at for a year or two later. So that it seems like there must be some level of confidence that like, I'm writing this joke, and then in 2 years, people are gonna laugh at it without ever knowing for sure. And then for TV, maybe never knowing at all, because you're not gonna be seeing it in public. It's gonna be in people's living rooms. How do you handle that uncertainty?
I think you can only control the you portion of the experience, which is, feeling like, you know what, I think this is really funny and I'm going to keep it in there and I'm proud of it. And I think, however it lands in another person is out of my hands and I just have to be happy with the product that's going out. And like in the case of Dave, I knew there was going to be a tonal shift this season. But I thought it was funnier. We all thought it was way funnier than it was received. I think the comments that we'd gotten was like, this is so dark and depressing now. And I was like, really? I thought it was hilarious. But we felt proud of it and it still ended up being like a great piece of work, even if other people felt like it wasn't as funny as season 1, but we were happy with it. And so we think that our job has been fulfilled.
The episode you wrote in season 2, like the opening of that episode where they're all monologuing, he's with the other rappers and they're all monologuing their background, was so freaking funny.
My childhood was ideal. I was very loved and respected by my friends and family.
How's it look? Does he look too Jewish?
Well, maybe I shouldn't say ideal, actually.
I think it's a little late to be asking that.
Too Jewish? He don't even got on his head or nothing.
There was a lot of body trauma, if I'm being honest with you. A couple of procedures I wish I could have back, a second crack at, but you live and you learn, as they say.
But yeah, Tripper, same with you. The lack of immediacy for an immediate art form like comedy, is that something you think about?
No, not really. I think maybe writer friends of mine that came from like improv and that kind of comedy path, they're more attuned to like searching for the laughter and like, whereas I've never done that before. I've never performed. So for me, it's always in a script and it's always just sitting there as a piece of paper until somebody shoots it. And so I can't control what's funny. What's really nerve-wracking is going to a test screening of something that you think is funny. And like, there's moments where you're like waiting for the audience to start just dying laughing and then nobody makes a sound and you're just shrinking in your chair. If you ever go to a test screening, the writer and the director and producers, they're all sitting in the back of that theater. So try to laugh as much as possible.
But sometimes they'll laugh at parts that you're like, that wasn't supposed to be funny.
Totally.
And they're like, fine.
Yeah, and occasionally they're laughing at one joke and there's the real like funny part is actually coming 2 seconds later, but they're all laughing and it's like, wait, do we need to cut the first joke? It's like, you do a lot of like Monday morning quarterbacking after those things where you're like trying to guess where the humor is. And it's like, at least my job is already over at that point. I'm like, I gave you guys the script. You figure out the rest now.
In Stuber, were there any examples of that? Things people either didn't laugh at that you were expecting them to, or things that were way funnier than you thought were going to be funny?
There's a male strip club scene in that movie that I'm very proud of. It's my life's work in one scene.
A lot of security back here. I'm gonna check it out. Stay put.
So yes, I'll have them see the house tomorrow at 3 p.m. Oh, that looks good. What is that, chicken salad?
Mm-hmm. Want a bite?
No, thank you, sweetie. But here's the thing, though. You really think you should be eating that?
Well, I am hungry, so.
Water only 4 hours before stage. Ain't that right, fellas?
Yeah.
Not even like a granola bar? Is that healthy?
Who the are you?
Well, no, actually, I just mean carbs are unfairly demonized. That's how he's looking. I wouldn't change what he's cooking.
There were like men after like each screening that was like varying degrees of disgust with that scene because it made them feel comfortable, and I was like, "F off." But no, we would try different takes in different test screenings, and like it was really on the director at that point to like figure out what's playing best for the different audiences. But the problem with those screenings is you're trying to like extrapolate out from 100 people to what 1 million people are going to like, and that's not a part of the process that I very much enjoy, because I'm like, I think we should, you want to just go with your gut and say this was funny or this is not funny or this is moving, but then the studio has a lot invested in it, obviously, and they want to try to make it the best possible movie.
Typically in TV you do table reads, but actually we've never done any for any of the shows, which is crazy to me. That like You're the Worst, for example, being the comedy that it is, we don't actually know until it's like on its feet the day that we're shooting. And sometimes it is like an interpretation issue, and we're like, oh no, like rhythmically something is off. Like we imagine the scene, this rhythm going a certain way. Luckily we're on set like as writers, and we can kind of let the director know like actually the intention was like this. But sometimes you just don't know until it's kind of up on its feet, and you have to kind of identify, because there's so many levels of interpretation.
I'm curious if you can speak more to, in both of your experiences, what the punch-up room looks like. Like what actually goes on in the writer's room when you're trying to make something funnier? What's the interaction with the writers like?
Well, on TV, we write everything kind of collaboratively anyways, but at that phase, like, you know, by then it's kind of like the last phase before it's polished and done, and we'll do cuts and punches kind of at the same time, because sometimes cutting things makes things funnier too, just by nature of the rhythm or whatever. But what we usually do at that point is like the writer will have done a few drafts and we bring it in, everyone kind of we'll go through and identify the moments that it's kind of like, feels a little flat, or maybe this joke kind of felt like first thought, so can we like look a little deeper into thinking like what's actually funny about this moment? And we're doing now more than ever actually like discussing why certain things are funny, because I think we're in a time where people are actually investigating like whether or not a joke is funny, or is it just like offensive, but is a joke that people have been telling since the beginning of time.
I'll probably speak more to it on the feature side. When you get close to production, you'll do a roundtable punch up session, which is like just the weirdest social experiment. And it's even worse on Zoom. It's like I hope I never do one again. But it's basically 10 or 12 or 15, however many writers that are reading a script for the first time, and they're coming to one room to like pitch jokes all over the place on the script, every page pretty much. And it's, when it's your own work, it can be kind of, I find it really fun, because I'm not too defensive. I don't think anything is precious that I write. So I'm like very curious to hear what people come up with. But it's really, everyone's kind of putting their heart and soul out there, pitching jokes that they came up with that they think are funny, and then a lot of times it's just silence in the room. It's like, because like you're not there to like please someone's, make someone feel good. So we're there to like find the best thing for the script, and it's like, but then occasionally someone says something and just rips, and it's like the entire room is dying, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good when you shoot it. It's just because comedy is so weird like that it's like. But if you do make 15 people laugh in the room, it usually goes into the script. It's like, okay, this is working.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you need some tough skin to like pitch jokes, and there's a vulnerability to do that, especially when it doesn't get a laugh. Was that something that came naturally?
I'll just say that the note that I've gotten a lot in my career is a macro note that just says, this needs to be funnier. Just a global note over the whole script. And it's like, okay, any pinpoint moments? No, just the whole thing. So that requires a thick skin, because you're like, man, you bought this because it was funny, I thought. So yeah, you can't be, if you're afraid of people telling you that you're not funny, then you probably shouldn't try this. But hopefully people have more tact and they can be like, yeah, it had some moments,
You just have to feel the freedom to fail in all the parts of the creative process, but specifically when you're like pitching jokes, because it's never gonna sound the way it sounds in your head. And so you have to just like say it. And if it doesn't work, great, move on to the next. And it really, it's not even thick skin. It's just like not being precious about each thing that you're coming up with. It should just be coming so fast that everything's like, well, whatever, it didn't work, on to the next one. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the actual joke part.
And that's what's so hard about a room sometimes, is like, I've got moments that like, I know if I wrote the dialogue in like a quarter page of a script, people would be like, this is funny, but I didn't articulate it well enough in the room, and it bombed, and like, that joke is dead. You're not pulling it back, just give up. And it's like, but sometimes I don't give up, and I try one more time, and people are like, please stop.
So awkward. Please stop. But that's the humor I like, is watching someone completely humiliate themselves.
Yeah. There are different types of humor, like you're saying. There are some that will make people laugh. There are some that are more cringe, more like The Office maybe, or things that happen on Dave, and things that happen in You're the Worst as well. How do you balance, or what are you most drawn to, or do you like all of them at the same time?
I like all these other shows that aren't necessarily cringe humor, but I think the stuff that tends to make me laugh is discomfort, because I think in real life, you have to kind of laugh in those moments to let out the tension, and that's really all like laughing is like letting out tension. And so I notice like in real life, it's like the moments where I'm just like this to myself, and it's like this is so horrible, and I'm like, I'm gonna remember this for later, and it's gonna be funny, hopefully. But for example, like in my episode of Dave, when he starts tanking and has to keep restarting the rap over and over, I was like, this is from when I was a kid and I was playing piano in recitals, and I kept like blanking and forgetting, having to start over and over and over. Either me experiencing that moment, which has happened, or me in the audience watching it happen to somebody else. It was always one of the worst moments ever.
Start it over. I'm just trying to get the hang of this new beat. You just don't come so close. Thanks. Can we go back to the first beat?
Everyone kind of has to have the same one, otherwise it wouldn't cut together.
Right. And you won't do yours again to the slower beat, no?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. Adapt. Play it up, start it up.
It's like dead silent, the most awkward situation. And so in the script, I was like a piano recital, he starts over and over and over again, and it goes on for way too long. Like in my mind, I was like, this scene has to just go on so long that it goes past discomfort to funny, and then back to not funny again for it to really work.
I love that scene, by the way. I think discomfort is a great word for it. I always think of conflict in every scene, no matter what genre you're writing in. Like, if you don't have conflict in a scene, it's going to get cut later on. To me, there are very few scenes that are really funny that don't have any conflict in them, because then everyone's just happy. And it's like, there's nothing funny about that. So I try to put people at odds as much as possible. And then the humor, once you can figure that part of it out, the humor does come very organically, because you have two people that hate the situation that they're in for whatever reason. It's easier to get the stakes to be higher. It's easier to get humor, more passion. Like anything you're trying to do, if it has conflict in it, that's kind of like, to me, like the key to it.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little, and we're talking about testing out jokes and doing focus groups or test screenings or what have you. But I think the thing that comes up a lot in a lot of these conversations is the dreaded studio notes or the network notes, especially if you're dealing with an executive that maybe doesn't understand your sense of humor or isn't getting the joke. Has that happened to either of you just through FX or through studios or through execs, and how do you handle?
No, I think if the other things in your story are working, the character arcs, the storytelling, aside from the comedy, I think if all that stuff is working, then it becomes a lot easier you get more of a free pass on the jokes. I do think that, because it's like, but when a scene isn't working for other reasons, then like the jokes become really under scrutiny, because it's like, they probably just want you to rewrite the whole thing or cut the scene, but they'll blame it on the jokes not working. So I think the more you can do telling a story without even thinking the comedy component of it, like the better that story is, the more kind of insurance you buy yourself. People are gonna like the whole overall script and the jokes in it.
Yeah. Just looking back on what you've done so far in your own projects, specifically the comedic ones, but I guess are there specific jokes or scenes or characters that you are most proud of coming up with, that you think hold up, that you've learned from?
I mean, the whole week situation, which is not the name of the episode of You're the Worst that I'd written. I mean, it was the original name, but not like the actual technical name. But there's a lot of things in the episode that made me laugh, particularly it's a cringy scene, but the end of the episode where Gretchen catches Jimmy in a lie and he's kind of backpedaling.
Jimmy, thank you so much for suggesting week.
No problem.
No, really. To be perfectly honest, it sounded fun, but I just wasn't feeling it at first, which worried me. So tonight I had meaningless sex with a rando.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear.
And, well, Jimmy, it made me realize I don't want to do that anymore. I'm happy being with just you. And I'm not even lying to myself, which if I'm not lying to someone else is usually the case. But it's true. I just want you. Did it work for you? You get it out of your system too?
I actually realised that I didn't need it before you did, so I didn't partake.
Like, I loved writing that scene, and the actors did such a great job of making it like so uncomfortable. And like I said, I guess that's my favorite kind of humor. So I am very, very proud of that moment in it. And I mean, I should go back and rewatch and see if it holds up.
I'd say probably on I'm Not Okay With This, there's an episode I wrote called Stand By Me, which is one of the characters' names. And it was just like, it just happened to be that episode where like, I could do everything. I could do like all the dramedy in one, where it can be sweet and emotional and funny.
What is this?
Well, it's macaroni, cheese, maple syrup, A1, ham, corn, margarine, cinnamon, fish sticks. soy sauce, grape jelly, crushed graham crackers, and something in a jar in the fridge, but I'm not sure what.
The thing is, I actually just ate.
Try it before it gets cold.
This is actually good.
Like, you don't always get to use like all the tools in your chest in your tool chest on a given episode. And that one I felt like very fortunate that I could like kind of do a little bit of everything, and I was really happy with the way it turned out.
So how do you write comedic moments that don't have dialogue without too much exposition?
You mean like set pieces? I find them hard to do. That's somebody that writes feature scripts that these kind of physical set pieces are part of them. But I take my best whack at them. I try to find other things that have made me laugh from other movies and see what they're doing. You want to create a set piece that you haven't seen before. And that can be really challenging. So like in Stuber, I always knew like they were going to get in a fight in a sporting goods store. But I'm like, I literally went to Big Five Sporting Goods in LA for like 2 hours one day and just like started picking up and like, could I use this? Could this be a weapon? Could I hit someone on the head with this? And like, it felt stupid, but then I went back home and I wrote, a version of that scene that changed 10 more times. But like, that's how I started, was just kind of like getting myself in the moment and saying, what could I do that I haven't seen someone else do before?
You're thinking about set pieces, and you're not necessarily actively writing. I'm always just very aware of my surroundings, and if I'm like in a situation and I'm just like looking at it, I'm like, this place exists? Like, this is crazy. I'll maybe make a note of it and make it the location for something and make something, more inherently funny. But I don't know how to actively do it, like make a choice to not have any dialogue and just be humorous visually. No idea.
On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. This project is supported in part by the Cultural Arts Division of the City of Austin Economic Development Department, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services, Texas Library and Archives Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, on the web at arts.gov. Austin Film Festival's On Story is supported in part by Final Draft, industry-standard screenwriting software that now includes extensive story planning tools. Find out more information about Final Draft at finaldraft.com. Support for On Story comes from Bogle Family Vineyards, 6th-generation farmers and 3rd-generation winemakers, creating sustainably grown wines that are a reflection of the Bogle family values since 1968. This show is produced by myself, Barbara Morgan. Our associate producers are Jamal Knox and Colin Heyer. Our editors are Jamal Knox and Travis Neely. Music is by Brian Ramos. Production assistance comes from SoundLab Inc., Travis Kennedy Sound, and KUT 90.5 in Austin. Go to austinfilmfestival.com to find out more about Austin Film Festival and Conference each October. Until next time, I'm Barbara Morgan, and this has been Austin Film Festival's On Story.